Hi, this is Brad T. York. I am doing a presentation on finding the money in grant writing. These are what I call first lessons because it's some just very basic information that you should have as you contemplate the idea of seeking funding for a grant proposal that you have. This is for the human services kinds of organizations. There are several types of funding for grants from human services. One would be the foundation. That is a kind of organization usually created by a wealthy person or persons who donate a lot of money to certain projects of a certain kind to improve society. One, of course, is governmental, and you could have a local government, state government, or a federal government. These are three different levels of government who provide funds for grants. There are corporate grant funds. This is usually a smaller amount than the other types. There are several sources of information you could use in regard to this. Your local library or university library is a good source. The foundation directory is an excellent source for finding funds from foundations, but you usually have to find somebody who has a subscription. It's fairly expensive, not something likely you will be getting yourself unless you do this on a regular basis. Your library might have a subscription to it. Community of Science is another source of funds. There is the web link for that. For federal grants, you got grants.gov as a possibility. Local and state resources, of course, various kinds of departments of state and local government are possibilities where you could find it. Or you could just Google it, so to speak. Simply insert the theme of your need into the internet and get many options as possibilities. If the site ends with .gov, this means it is a governmental site. You may need to narrow the scope of your keywords if the first try ends up with a lot of too many different options available. You might need to narrow the scope by adding additional words to your keyword list when you Google the issue. Some issues to consider when you are dealing with the task of finding funds. One is the target purpose of the funding source. Do they mostly serve at-risk youth, substance abusers? Do they deal with the issue of death and dying, or what? Usually they have some kind of purpose to some degree that can give you guidance on what they're likely to fund. Another issue is what geographic area does it target? And of course, is that your geographic area? Also, what type of organization can be an applicant? Profit organizations typically are not eligible for grants funding from foundations. What is the minimum or maximum amount they fund? Often you'll find that they don't fund the amount of money you need. What is the time frame for applications? Be clear about that. And what is the probability of success? This is a very subjective thing you have to figure out yourself. They don't give you specific guidance on that. To share some tips in acquiring funds, start with a good idea of what you want funded and why. What do you want to accomplish? What kinds of things will you do? Why will you do these things to accomplish that outcome, general outcome? Number two, make contacts with funding organizations if this is possible. Do not make assumptions about what they will do or don't do. Ask questions. And try to get at the idea of what they really want to fund. Follow all instructions to the letter. I believe that's the first law or rule of grant funding. Follow all instructions. Further tips, the closer to home the funder is, the better, generally speaking. A national funder will usually be interested only if the project will have national significance. If it's something peculiar to your area and not relevant to many parts of the nation, you're less likely to get funding from a national funder, like a national foundation or the federal government. Showing other financial support strengthens your request because the funding source knows that at least one other source of funding has valued your idea highly enough to have given funds. Last, federal requests take much time. 3 keys to success, let's talk about them here. The relationship you have with the funding source. If you can develop a relationship, do everything you can in that regard, not only because you'll get more and more information that you need to be successful, but also you'll have a chance to engender their confidence in you and the kind of person you are and the kind of organization you represent. Another is the fit of your proposal with the interests of the funding source. If they're dealing with developmentally delayed people, then your proposal, of course, must deal with that group. Finally, the quality of your proposal, of course, will be a factor. I would say look locally first. Seek funds from any source of funding that clearly is local and addresses local needs, because you're there and you're more likely to be successful in getting funds. An example might be the local United Way. Others might be local or state governments or regional foundations. A major advantage is the increased likelihood that you can establish a relationship with the funding source. A second advantage is geography. 2 of the major issues that help you be more or less successful in your effort. The Community of Science is a source of funding funds, as mentioned earlier. This is an organization with information about scientific research and grant opportunities. Here's the website. It's designed for people with organizational affiliations like universities or nonprofit agencies, so it's best to have such an affiliation. I assume that you will be having that kind of affiliation. Grants are not usually given to individuals, by the way. So you as an individual are not usually eligible to receive a program grant fund. I'll give you an example here. In the summer of 2008, I used the keyword child abuse. I found, among other things, the McCarthy Family Foundation was currently accepting grants funds to fund a proposal to fund child abuse prevention programs. Nonprofit agencies were eligible that fitted my situation, but it was only for programs in San Diego County, which was not where I was located, so that didn't work. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of where I went into, I had dead-end roads. I want to illustrate this so as to encourage you to be patient when you start seeking funds, because you usually go down this road. Another example, also in the child abuse search, was an example from the Target Corporation. This was for family violence prevention. Purpose was to prevent family violence through such mechanisms as parent training and family counseling. Notice that it says both two key things here. One is what it was trying to accomplish. The other is what mechanisms do they want you to use to accomplish it. So if you don't have something that's related to parent training or family counseling, if it's very, very different from that, your likelihood of getting funds from this source would not be very good. So continuing this, eligibility was where Target stores were located. In my situation at that time, I did qualify, but it was for small grants, $1,000 to $3,000. That did not fit my need at the time. So this was another dead-end road. Restrictions in this were listed, like not individuals or educational institutions or religious organizations and so forth. So that is one of the things you learn when you look through the website for a funding source, are restrictions, things that, bases on which you would potentially not be eligible. Here is another example, the Abel Foundation. I used the keyword adolescent parenting. Found an example that addresses issues related to family disintegration. That was the theme they were interested in. A rationale was supplied for the purpose of the grant, which could be a good guide for determining potential success of your proposal. But it was restricted to Baltimore, Maryland, which is not where I was located at that time. A source for federal grants is grants.gov. An advantage of federal grants is there tends to be much more money available, but also there is a lot of sophisticated competition. Here is the website, www.grants.gov. If you search there, one, of course, when you go to that particular website, use a keyword search. I use adolescent parenting. One of the things I found was parenting capacities and health outcomes in youth and adolescents from the National Institute of Health. A key thing here I want you to focus on is the R01 in parentheses in the middle of that entry. The capital letter R like that usually means it is a research grant, not a program grant. Most likely you are looking for something to support a program, not something to support the research you want to do. The purpose, the program announcement solicits research applications aimed at increasing the parenting skills and capacities of parents and caregivers to improve the health outcomes of their young and adolescent children. So this gives you some guidance on what they're after. Notice that this refers both to parenting and health outcomes, and that this is a research grant, not a program grant. The keys to this grant was to recognize that a key to adopting poor health practices is parenting role modeling. It should target parents or caregivers with emphasis on parenting skills. So there are several key concepts to think about as you're thinking about the suitability of this source of funding for your proposal. You should include at least 2 risk factors. And you should be concerned with reducing risk factors and enhancing protective factors. Here is a summary. Start with a good idea of what you want to do and the goal of it. Search the internet. Be sure your agency is eligible. Be sure your proposal fits the funding source. Clarify what the funding source wants. Make contact with the funding source if you can do that. This is the end of my presentation. I hope this is helpful to you.